Welcome to HFY Sci-fi channel. Don't forget to subscribe and explore. A cargo shuttle broke through the grime-stained atmosphere, metal hull streaked with impact burns and acid scoring. Hydraulic arms hissed low as landing gear kissed dust. No welcome, no ceremony. Just cold air rushing into a hangar lined with rusted catwalks and armed men who no longer remembered boredom. Inside, the stink of coolant and burned insulation lingered like a second skin. Every surface wore scars. Bullet dents, blood streaks, names etched with blades. Security detail watched from shadowed alcoves, faces obscured, eyes visible. One man stepped off the ramp slow, boots crunching over cracked concrete scattered with glass beads and dropped syringes. He didn't speak. No one greeted him. A siren wailed somewhere out of sight. Not urgent. Routine. Another shift ending. Another shipment arriving. The man lit a cigarette with thumb and breath. Smoke curled toward a vent that hadn't worked in years. Footsteps gathered behind the blast doors. Movement like animals herded too long. Guards pulled them forward. 3 figures. One limping. One coughing up red foam. The last, small, hunched, carried by 2 handlers like spare equipment. Her limbs dangled, scraped raw. Bare feet dragged over floor seams. Hair tangled, skin gray-blue beneath layers of soot and dried fluid. She didn't speak. Didn't resist. Eyes stayed open, glassy, unblinking. The guards laughed when they dropped her at his feet. Welcome gift, one of them said. Break her, patch her, use her, doesn't matter. Just don't waste her. No one expected a reply. None came. He looked down, said nothing, and stepped past her body like it wasn't there. 2 hours later, inside the assigned quarters, the lights buzzed dim. Heat stuttered from a wall unit meant for half this square footage. She lay where they'd left her. Arms curled against her ribs, a smear of blood trailing from the corner of her mouth to the floor. The silence pressed harder than gravity. In the corner, gear unpacked itself. Rations, weapons, surveillance keys, old holotags. A duffel sagged open, revealing nothing personal. Nothing from before. One chair. One cot. No questions. Her breathing rasped in short, cut-off bursts. Not sleeping. Not dead. From the shelf, a water pouch. Not cold, not clean. He held it near her lips. She didn't move. He tried again. This time, her mouth parted. Drops vanished behind cracked lips. No gratitude. No recognition. Just instinct. He sat, pulled the chair close, leaned forward with elbows on knees. For an hour, neither moved. Blood stained the floor in a thin arc, half wiped by her shifting weight. Flies had already found her skin. He waved them off, slow, like someone unlearning violence. Night didn't fall on this moon. The artificial sky outside flicked between amber and violet every 6 hours. Enough to unsettle circadian rhythms. Enough to remind newcomers this wasn't home. She hadn't changed position. He reached for a medkit, one of the unmarked ones tucked behind his sidearm. No scan logs. No syndicate inventory tags. Cloth soaked in antiseptic unrolled like memory. He cleaned a wound above her collarbone. She winced, but no sound came. The ribs on her left side rose too sharp. Bruised. Possibly fractured. Every breath a calculation. He wrapped her torso in thermal cloth, too large for her size. It slipped. He adjusted it again, this time slower. Fingers grazed heat beneath grime. Muscle and bone barely shielded by skin that hadn't known comfort in days, maybe longer. Still, she said nothing. Watched him with the eyes of someone already punished for hope. From outside, boots passed. Voices laughed. One shouted something about blood sport in Bay 9. Another mentioned a kill count. The man stayed seated. Her hand twitched once against the floor. Not reaching, responding. A reflex with no target. Another hour passed. She hadn't moved since. He stood, dragged a storage crate across the room, lifted her carefully, set her down on makeshift bedding like cargo. Blankets didn't exist here. Neither did mercy. But the room stayed warm. He sat again. back against the wall. Smoke rising from a fresh stick pinched between thumb and forefinger. Eyes fixed on the slow rise and fall of her chest. No words. No names exchanged. Just breath. Shallow but steady. The next morning, she hadn't moved. The cloth had slipped halfway down her shoulder, revealing more of the bruises. Purple halos beneath greenish film, spread like impact points from something metal. Her wrist had dried blood crusted to the bone. No attempt to dress herself. No request. No shame. No defense. He left food near her side, tore open a protein wrap and set it within reach. She didn't touch it. Hours passed before her fingers closed over the edge of the packet. One slow bite. Chewing without taste. Water, too. He poured it into a cracked cup, placed it against her lips again. This time she sipped without flinching. She hadn't said a word. Not a sound except breath. His console pinged once. Routine health audit. Standard for new hires. The system expected confirmation of contraband disposal. A scanned corpse, blood index, timestamp. None provided. He keyed in a line of code. A body listed as expired during transfer, logs marked corrupted. He scrubbed the footage from the corridor cam, rerouted surveillance to loop 30 seconds of empty room. Enough to pass casual review. Still, the motion sensors on the deck-level doors kept flagging strange pulses. Too small to be a patrol. Too irregular for maintenance bots. The station AI asked once, "Confirm organic in unauthorized section?" He responded, "False positive." No reply followed. That night, she shifted during sleep. Not rest. Not trust. Just exhaustion folding her body toward something softer than tile. He covered her again. No words exchanged. The next morning, she flinched at the light. Artificial sunrise from the overhead ducts burned red into silver. She backed into a corner with her hands raised. Not to fight. Just to block brightness she couldn't bear. Her skin reacted like paper pressed against heat. He switched off the light, drew blackout panels from a supply box no one used anymore. Pinned them to the vent grills with scrap metal and screws. The room darkened into something less cruel. No thank you. No recognition. She curled her knees to her chest, watched him from the narrow space between her fingers. By third shift, voices started poking around. One guard mentioned a dead girl not showing up in disposal. Another made jokes about broken merchandise being recycled too early. A technician asked if anyone had logged the transfer report. He kept walking. A crate moved. A floor panel lifted. The shaft beneath hadn't been opened in years. Built as a secondary coolant run during the first expansion phase. Long since decommissioned. Damp, narrow, metallic scents soaked into every corner. He carried her down without speaking. Each step vibrated faintly, not from his weight but from the pulse of machines deeper in the facility. The station's bones still moved. Still breathed, even without light or eyes. Blankets layered across the shaft wall. Water tubes rerouted from a nearby purifier. Stolen thermal pads buried under makeshift bedding. No one checked the shaft's sensors. No one cleaned this low. She didn't resist the move. Didn't ask why. Just lay back in silence, watching shadows crawl across the metal walls. Her breathing stayed shallow. Uneven. He wiped her forehead with gauze, fed her what little nutrition he could afford to steal from his own rations. Protein bars cut into soft pieces. Liquids mixed with glucose powder. She took each dose without protest. One night, her hand knocked over a cup. The sound startled her more than it startled him. She scrambled back into a corner, chest rising too fast. Eyes wide, jaw locked, limbs ready to collapse. He picked up the cup, set it down upright, slid it toward her again. She stared at his fingers like they held fire. No apology. No anger. Just confusion. The next morning, she was gone. Not far. Not escaped. Just moved deeper into the shaft, curled behind a rusted vent. Hidden. Waiting. He didn't call for help. Didn't report the anomaly. logged his rounds, returned to duty, eyes scanning screens no one cared to watch. Monitors filled with unreadable telemetry and heat map. Her outline never appeared. She stayed beneath detection thresholds. The station AI sent another query. Confirm irregular thermal drift on subdeck 9? He replied, faulty insulation. Again, no reply. That night, she was in the same spot he'd left food. Cup refilled. Bandages disturbed but still wrapped tight. A small smear of dried orange along her cheek where medicine had reacted with her skin. She watched him while pretending to sleep. The next shift, a new body arrived at the outpost. Unconscious, missing fingers, throat collar still active. Thrown into a cell, forgotten. He glanced once, then walked on. Back inside the shaft, her eyes followed him longer than usual. No speech. No gesture. Just silence. But something in it had changed. She convulsed the second night. Jaw clenched, back arched, ribs lifting off the floor like someone drowning without water. A pulse roared through her skin, too fast, too erratic. He held her head against his thigh to keep her from shattering her teeth. Blood traced from her nose in a slow line across his leg. Breath came only in fragments, sharp and useless. Nothing in his kit worked. Not the anti-shock tabs. Not the saline tubes. Not the pressure clamps. He dug into the bottom of his duffel where personal inventory wasn't cataloged. Found the stimpack wrapped in insulation foil, heat-sensitive, stolen from a raid 4 stations back. Human dosage would rupture her heart. He halved it, eyed the gauge, quartered it, tapped the injector against his boot to dislodge any frozen gas. Injected it low in her abdomen, between 2 old bruises. Her body shuddered once. Then once more. No scream. No cry. Just breath, finally breath, thin and rattling. Over the next 8 hours, he kept her skin damp with filtered cloth, regulated her core with scavenged thermoplast gel, swapped bandages until his hands reeked of antiseptic and blood rot. She never woke. But she didn't die. On the 5th day, her fingers twitched without pain. Her lips moved, not in speech but something like memory trying to resurface. He watched the rhythm of her breathing, slower now, no longer a countdown. Her neck bore a healing scar near the implant port. He covered it with gauze, then with cloth. Not to hide it, just to keep her warm. 1 ration left. He split it into thirds. Ate none. His quarters upstairs stayed untouched. Blank reports filed, timestamps forged, questions avoided with minimal words. Syndicate patrols passed through the hall without slowing. Cameras recorded empty air. Heat signatures marked by old mining bots rerouted to cover her absence. She opened her eyes on day 6. Not fully. Just enough to look. Focus sharpened over an hour. Her gaze didn't scan the room. It locked onto his hands first. Tracked his movements. Spoon scraping canister, cloth wrung dry, knife cleaning old bandage adhesive from her arm. Every action followed. Her throat worked. No sound came. He offered water again. This time she reached for the cup. Fingers closed too weakly to hold it, but they closed. That night, no movement. But her eyes didn't shut. She watched him repack the medical gear. Watched him clean the corner where blood had pooled. Watched him settle into the space across from her, and lean his head against the wall. She blinked once. The following day, she shifted before he approached. Pulled cloth over her chest, sat upright in slow, jerking motions. Pain etched into each breath, but she bore it without noise. He handed her a warm gel packet. She sniffed it, touched the surface, stared into his face. Her left hand mimicked the way he tore it open. She copied every movement. Crude, slow, unsure, but precise. He tore another, exaggerated the grip, showed her the angle. Her hand mirrored his. When the seal broke, she jumped. Not from fear. From unfamiliarity. Liquid touched her mouth. She drank with tiny gulps, staring at his eyes without blinking. 3 nights passed. She hadn't spoken. She hadn't slept with both eyes shut. Her hand touched his wrist once, unintentionally. He moved it away without force. She let it go. The next night, she reached again. Not wrist, hand this time. She pressed her palm to his knuckles. Skin against skin. Fragile. Warm. He didn't pull back. She held it there. Light contact. No pressure. Her eyes searched his face, not for reaction, just to understand what this meant, if anything. He stayed still. Minutes passed like that. Eventually, she lowered her hand to her lap, eyes still fixed on his. Not asking. Not thanking. Just watching. And breathing. The first mark appeared near the vent grill. Not carved, not drawn with precision, just a rough circle traced in the dust by one fingertip. He noticed it beside her sleeping form, faint, smudged in one quadrant. When he wiped it clean, she redrew it. Same shape. Same angle. A pause between two breaths, like ritual. The next day, she added a second mark. A line crossing the circle, splitting it east to west. He didn't ask what it meant. She wouldn't have answered. But something in her gaze told him she expected him to notice. To remember. Hours passed. She sat beside the wall, staring at the dust like it held something lost. 2 more symbols followed. One resembled a hand. The other resembled nothing he recognized, just curves intersecting like broken bone under skin. He copied it on a ration wrapper. She nodded once. First time she acknowledged imitation. Night fell without sleep. Her breath grew shallow again, not from pain but effort. She raised her hand, pressed her palm to the wall, and released a sound, low, humming, barely above vibration. The air shifted. Nothing moved, but the room felt different, like sound had weight now, memory encoded into vibration. Light shimmered across her wrist. Not heat, not projection from any device he owned. Just illumination that hovered in the skin itself, pulsing with a rhythm not his. The glow intensified, casting a brief shape above her shoulder, 3 figures standing before a burning arch, faces obscured. One of them held something to the sky. The shape trembled, dissolved. She collapsed forward without warning. He caught her before her head hit the floor. Her breathing returned after 10 seconds. She tried again the next night. Slower this time. Less light. Just a pattern of colors in the air like smoke curling through glass. Her hand moved in arcs, painting nothing, but the colors responded. Green. Blue. Silver. Then gold. He recognized the last color. Not from any tech in the station. From old briefings during the war. Forbidden tech. Lost cultures. Artifacts coded with organic memory. Most had been destroyed. Some locked in vaults beneath frozen colonies. She was using memory the way others used words. He waited until the lights faded. She placed one hand on his chest and released another hum, quieter than before. The shape above her hand returned. This time, only one figure. Kneeling before a tall, horned being. Smoke poured from its eyes. He knew that shape. Military files had no name for it, only the designation. L6P Exaform. Lyran Royal Architecture. She wasn't cargo. She wasn't salvage. She was the kind of relic nations buried under mountains and swore had never existed. He stood without speaking, paced the shaft twice, every instinct pulling him toward the exit, toward the nearest comms relay, toward the encrypted line he swore never to use again. But he didn't go. She watched him from behind the symbols. Her eyes said nothing. Her posture never changed. In the corner of the room, another circle appeared in the dust. This one perfect. Too perfect for a fingertip. It rotated by itself. He stepped back. No power signature. No device registered. Just dust, moving as if obeying something older than light. She moved her hand again. Her face remained calm, but her throat twitched. The projection formed a new scene. Thousands kneeling before a single throne made of what looked like breathing metal. No weapons. No banners. Just silence. The image blinked out. She touched her own chest. Then touched his hand. He didn't move. She repeated the gesture. Chest. Hand. Not instruction. Recognition. The Lyran weren't extinct. One survived. One still carried memory. He dropped to one knee without realizing. She didn't respond. Just laid back down. Closed her eyes. The last mark she left before sleep wasn't a symbol. It was a fingerprint pressed into the floor, curved beside his own. They started whispering after the second week. Not openly. Not loud. Just half-spoken questions over card tables, beside coolant tanks, near locked crates nobody owned. Someone on Deck 9 had access to clean injections. Someone was patching up burn wounds with military-grade balm. Someone had eyes that didn't match their pay grade. No name. Just a word. Healer. Shift leaders dismissed it first. Too vague. Too quiet. Just sick men inventing saints. But the rumors didn't shrink. They moved. A guard claimed he'd found a blood trail that didn't belong to any scheduled cargo. Another claimed his ration box was lighter than logged, 2 missing vials with no broken seals. One of the techs filed an anomaly report on motion sensors in a corridor marked disabled 6 cycles ago. Security rerouted cameras to overlap the blind zone. Foreshowed nothing. One glitch to black. He adjusted his routines. Changed paths between shaft and quarters. Falsified more logs. Moved her again, deeper into the old power loop housing beneath the collapsed fuel vent. Air was thinner, walls tighter, but the temperature held. She didn't complain. Guards began patrolling in pairs. Not for protection, for witness. Every injury now catalogued. Every ration double-counted. The whisper turned into a name. Not spoken to his face. Just behind it. That's when the lieutenant came. He didn't knock. Steel boots scraped against the corridor rail. A man shaped like punishment without a reason. Eyes too clean. Uniform too new. Scars that looked placed. Words like dried oil, slow, thick, refusing to lift. He brought no backup. He didn't need any. Said he wanted to confirm a rumor. Said something had been stolen. Said someone soft was keeping value in places it didn't belong. He touched the edge of the locker. Not searching. Claiming. Asked if the girl was still breathing. Didn't ask her name. Didn't ask her condition. Just her value. Said the syndicate had use for live goods. Said recovery made her a liability. Said healing what was meant to break confused the hierarchy. Said he'd take her from here. No request. No demand. Just declaration. He was still speaking when the first strike landed. No build-up. No threat. No speech. Just knuckles to jaw. Bone cracking against bone. The lieutenant staggered. Not far. Just enough to recognize surprise. Drew a blade from inside his boot. Swung twice. Missed both. Not from lack of skill, from distance misjudged by pride. A second hit crushed cartilage. Third collapsed his left knee. No one came. Guards heard the noise. They always did. But they didn't come. Metal scraped against floor. The blade kicked across tile. The man on the ground coughed. Tried to speak. Blood poured before words. Boot pressed to his throat. Pressure measured. No emotion behind it. He didn't kill him. Didn't need to. Silence worked longer than screams. The lieutenant crawled away with his eyes wide and words broken. Never came back. Never looked back. That night, the shaft door was sealed tighter than usual. The girl sat upright when he entered. No smile. No question. Just her fingers drawing another symbol in dust, slower than before. 2 intersecting circles. One broken. One whole. She placed her hand over the broken one. Looked up. Waited. He sat beside her without removing his boot. Without touching his side, still throbbing from the strike he'd taken in the ribs. No words passed. She reached for his hand again. He let her take it. For the first time, her grip had weight. She waited until the outer alarms dimmed. Until footsteps above turned into dull vibrations instead of threat. Until the vents hissed low enough to be counted between breath. Only then did she pull at his sleeve and nod once toward the lower tunnel. No words. Just the look. He followed. Boots moved quiet through forgotten shafts, past gates sealed with melt welds long rusted through. Steel dust clung to his coat. Her fingers danced over wall panels like she remembered them from somewhere else, from a time that didn't exist here. Every gesture exact, every pause deliberate. She never hesitated, not even at the split in the corridor where the lights bled red from ancient power lines buried too deep to track. They reached the dead zone. 3 doors stood fused in place. One had been marked with syndicate glyphs warning collapse. Another sat half-sunken from tremors 2 years back. She led him to the third, untouched, locked in silence. Her palm pressed flat to the surface. Light pulsed behind it. Not from tech. From her. The wall split open. Not a door. A fracture. They entered a chamber colder than it should have been. Air carried something sharp. Not metallic. Not mold. Memory maybe. If memory could rot. Glass pillars rose from the floor. Cracked, fractured, some completely shattered. Between them, a single core suspended in clear stasis. No wires, no interface. Just a crystalline heart pulsing with slow light. Rhythmic, unreadable. She stepped into the circle of broken stone and knelt beside the structure. Fingers touched the surface once. It came alive. Images burst outward, not projected, not beamed, just formed, surrounding him in every direction. Not holograms. Not illusions. More like presence. They filled the room without occupying space. Tall beings stood under silver trees that reached toward a sky filled with 3 suns. Children carved runes into obsidian walls while older ones floated spheres of water through air without tools. Cities carved into cliffs hummed without wind. Music without sound hung between buildings that breathed. His chest tightened. She stood beneath the vision, eyes cast upward. Not crying. Just remembering too much at once. He saw her there, younger. Laughing beneath a waterfall that shimmered with gold minerals. Her face unbruised. No scars. No fear. The memory fractured. Flames swept the vision aside. Steel rained from orbit. Screams, human ones, filtered through the mouths of soldiers in faceless armor. No warning. No mercy. Towers collapse. The waterfall turned red. She moved toward the core again, hand flat, voice humming low. Another image bled out. A chamber, circular, carved with those same symbols she had drawn in dust. Her family stood in a line. 5 of them. Parents. Siblings. One child clutching a carved object shaped like a sun. Doors burst open. Boots entered first. Not hers. Not their kind. The family did not resist. Each was executed without a word. No warning. No demand. No negotiation. Just clinical movement. Precision. Records erased before the bodies hit the floor. The image froze on her face. Young. Helpless. Hidden behind a console. She hadn't moved during any of it. Her body still faced the core. Hands clenched to her sides. Breathing shallow. Not from grief. From memory relived too often to register. He didn't speak. Couldn't. Something in his gut twisted. Not just from what he saw. From what he'd once been told. Missions scrubbed from archives. Species listed as extinct. Reports buried under layers of authorization no one ever questioned. She turned toward him. Eyes no longer distant. Just open. No hate. No request. Only the weight of survival that hadn't been asked for. He stepped forward. The light from the core dimmed. Her hand reached for his. He took it without hesitation. Without protection. For the first time, it wasn't about saving her. It was about carrying something no one else had dared to remember. The breach alert sounded during a shift change. Not loud. Not chaotic. Just one tone, sustained longer than protocol allowed. Enough for those who knew how to listen. Log discrepancies flagged first. Routine scan through medical inventories showed signatures that hadn't been registered through official port. One container marked depleted was still half full. Timestamp drifted by 7 seconds. That was all it took. Command didn't ask questions. Orders were issued in less time than it took to light a mat. 12 armed personnel rerouted to lower deck. No announcement. No warning. Just boots redirected with kill codes already activated. Inside the shaft, lights dimmed by a fraction. Just enough for a shadow to shift where none had moved. She looked up before he heard it. Her eyes tracked something that hadn't yet arrived. He reached for his belt. Weapons gone. Traded for survival gear 2 days ago. Nothing left but memory. He grabbed the core. She didn't argue. They ran. Old corridors welcomed no one. Pressure lines hissed through cracked walls. Pipes overhead groaned with age. Warning glyphs peeled from bulkheads with each vibration underfoot. The weight of the structure itself had begun to rebel. From behind, footstep. Measured. Confident. They'd found the shaft. He keyed in the override on a control panel not touched in 3 years. Rust scraped beneath his nails. Sequence failed. Tried again. No time for perfection. Just speed. On the 3rd attempt, the door groaned open. Inside, a relay room long buried by mining debris. One panel still intact. Lights pulsed red across the board. Manual access only. The AI was watching. He didn't speak to it. No time. No trust. She stepped forward. Hand touched steel. Sound rose from her throat. Not music. Not language. Just vibration in raw form, too low for human ears to parse meaning, but the panel lit green. Path cleared. She collapsed against him. He caught her. Carried her across the threshold. Explosives had been planted cycles ago. Part of a failed expansion project. Charges never removed. Maps still held the coordinates. He tapped them in without pausing. First section blew. Dust filled the shaft. Second charge detonated beneath their path. Rock split. Flame licked the air behind them. Debris rained in sheets. One caught her leg. She cried out once. Didn't fall. He lifted her without breaking stride. Alarms failed. Too much noise. Too much failure in one system not built to hold this many sins at once. The AI spoke once. Not in words. In light. Panels above their path blinked in sequences not designed for navigation. Direction through color. Left. Right. No confusion. She sang again, this time with blood on her lips. The core pulsed against his back. Heat seared through the strap holding it. They reached the old tram bay. No power. No track. Just a slope leading to open air. He looked behind. Nothing visible. But the ground shook under each footstep now. He placed her on the floor. Tore open his side pouch. Injected her with the last stim. Watched her eyes widen. Watched her mouth shape something he couldn't understand. She tried to stand. Failed. He lifted her again. Doors behind them opened. 3 figures stepped through. Weapons raised. No command. Just movement. He pressed the trigger on the last charge. The wall behind them exploded inward. Dust swallowed the lights. He ran through it. She pressed her forehead to his chest, not to hide, just to stay upright. Above them, the AI rerouted power from 10 subsystems to open one door. Light burst through. He didn't look back. Smoke clung to his skin like oil, every breath a rasp. No visor. No gear. Just worn boots pounding scorched tile and a dying girl pressed against his chest. Her blood soaked through his shirt in slow pulses. Not fast enough to kill her yet, not slow enough to stop worrying. Gunfire snapped behind them. Too far to hit, too close to ignore. Walls bled sparks. Doors sealed one after another, not by design, but because systems were failing faster than anyone could compensate. The outpost had turned on itself. The corridor narrowed before the ascent. He pushed through a maintenance crawlspace half-collapsed from years of neglect. Steel bit into his shoulders. Her body shifted, head falling against his neck, breath hot but fading. He reached the lift column. Manual override only. The console read no power. She stirred, fingers twitching against his ribs. Not a message. Not panic. Just instinct. He jammed a pry rod into the panel, snapped it loose, tore the insulation, crossed the lead. Power surged. The column lit. He didn't wait for calibration. Slammed the call button. Platform dropped with a screech that sounded like bone cracking under strain. Ascent began before the floor stopped shaking. Midway up, sirens shriek. New code. Not breach. Not lockdown. Evacuation protocol. He knew what that meant. Syndicate assets were pulling out. Only one shuttle would be left. He braced against the lift frame, arms tightening around her weight. She murmured something without sound. Eyes half-lidded. Not asleep. Not conscious. Someplace between. The platform jolted as it hit the upper deck. He ran. Blinding lights spilled through the cracks above. Hangar bay doors half open. Wind funneled through ruptured glass, lifting dust into the air like ash. One shuttle remained. No syndicate markings. Civilian frame. Old model. Independent contractor. Pilot stood outside it, helmet off, rifle slung, expression bored until he saw what was being carried toward him. He raised a hand. Not in greeting. In price. No room for debate. No chance of persuasion. He wanted something. Identification chip. The only one still recognized by the orbital relays. Blood encoded. Irreplaceable. Without it, no past existed. No homeworld. No citizenship. No records. No way back. He reached into his belt, pulled the capsule, crushed it against the man's palm. Trade accepted. The pilot turned away without a word. Ramp dropped. He stepped aboard. Her weight shifted. No longer limp, but trembling. Not fear. Not cold. She looked toward the viewport, saw open sky through the cracked hangar teeth. Stars stared back without blinking. She reached toward them with fingers barely lifted from her lap. Engines growled to life. The pilot didn't wait. Dust lifted from the floor. Her hands stayed suspended. Eyes wide. Not in awe. Not confusion. Recognition. As if something she thought lost had just remembered her too. The room was white but not clean. Corners frayed with time, walls marked by fingerprints that had once clung to hope or pain. A single console blinked amber in the corner, no sound. The lights overhead pulsed low, rhythm too slow to mimic life, too fast to forget where they were. She lay across the bed with wires sunk just beneath the skin, lines too thin to be human, too precise to be coincidence. Her breath rose without strain. No blood on her lips, no shaking hands, but her eyes hadn't moved since the door sealed. He sat beside her, shirt torn, shoulder split open from shrapnel no one had cleaned. His hand rested on the edge of her cot, unmoving, as if placing weight there kept him anchored. Burned skin across the back of it still peeled when the air got too dry. He never looked away from her. Monitors didn't beep. Machines didn't speak. Only the sound of her breath, soft, almost unsure. She turned her head toward him without effort. Her voice came low, cracked from misuse, yet whole. "You didn't take me." He didn't answer at first. Just stared at her until she reached for his hand. Not fast. Not desperate. Just real. He closed his fingers over hers. "No." I remembered what it felt like to be worth saving. Somewhere beyond the hull, a comm line opened. Bounty listings spread across 6 systems. His name appeared forth. No charge listed. Just an old file, reopened. Below the bounty image, a final tag. Classification, traitor. The file closed on its own. Inside the medbay, his hand stayed where it was. She didn't let go.